Okay, we're live for the second time in 5 minutes. I'm joined today by special guest James Snelgrove, adventure enthusiast who spent a career working in adventure, travel, the outdoors, and all sorts of stuff. So I will give you a chance to introduce yourself, James, because you're going to do a much better job of it than me. Why don't you give us a quick overview of what's been going on since I met you at Halfords all those years ago and what you're doing now.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's cool to catch up after all these years and kind of help out with this, and yeah, kind of excited. I'm James. I'm from the town over from Cameron in the UK, and I left school. I was never intending to go to university. And then when my parents quite helpfully pointed out to me that my plans of a gap year, the word gap kind of meant that there had to be something after it. You know, all I said I wanted to do, I wasn't interested in university or a job. All I wanted to do was travel. And they were helpful enough to point me in the direction that, you know, you do need money and stuff to do so. So I actually went to university and I hated it. So after about 3 months, I decided I wanted out, but I had at least the maturity enough as a 19-year-old to tell myself to do another 3 months. And then after that 3 months was done, I took my last student loan payment and I got out of there. And I did what anyone would do, which was I moved into my car. And then I lifted my car, which in the UK winter was a whole bunch of fun. And I got into the skydiving industry. And then it was there that really things kicked off, because I was surrounded by, you know, people that were in the adventurous kind of lifestyle. You know, they traveled, they skydived. Then when they weren't skydiving, they were doing other cool stuff. And so I got to be around some really cool people. And then after a couple of years of doing that, I realized that, you know, for various reasons, that skydiving wasn't going to work out as a career. And so I was looking for other options. And I had a girlfriend at the time who had been a scuba diver since she was real young. Her parents were really keen divers, and she was like, yeah, why not take up scuba diving? And that was in 2010, and at the end of that year I became a professional, became dive master, and the rest is history.
All right, awesome, good stuff. So you've had a pretty you've done some pretty amazing jobs there. Why was it out of interest that the skydiving wasn't turning out to be a long-term career choice for you?
It could have been, but when I was 20 years old, you know, I didn't have the, I guess, maturity and the organization and really the determination to actually kind of knuckle down with it. It's really difficult to get to a position in skydiving where you can actually earn a decent enough money, especially in the UK. On reflection, if I knew then what I knew now and had the kind of level of maturity that I have now, I would have done things a little bit differently. I mean, I'm sure we all would have done. And I definitely could have made it a bit more of a career than I did. But as it turns out, I don't really regret it as such, because although skydiving is obviously awesome, definitely provides opportunities to travel and do all that cool stuff, scuba diving is actually a much broader sport. There's a lot more facets to it that make it a lot more interesting. And actually really skydiving at higher levels is quite competitive. It's very much a team sport, and I'm more into kind of solo adventure. So actually diving and cycle touring, that kind of worked out better for me anyway.
Right, yeah, I kind of get that actually. You know, it's a bit like what I sort of relate that to is skiing for me. You know, I like all forms of skiing, but in all honesty, the one that gets me really excited is cross country or touring. Like downhill skiing, just going up and down, it's awesome and it's super fun. But for me, it lacks that sort of sense of adventure that you get from more exploratory type sports.
Absolutely, yeah. Backcountry for me would be fun.
Yeah,
like
So what? Give us one of the highlights of the last few years then for you in terms of sort of adventures that you've done.
Well, there's a few, funnily enough. For me, once I got into diving, one of the biggest goals I had, for no other reason than really pure ego, was to dive to 100 meters, which, if you're from the States, is 330 feet. So when I finally hit that, goal. That was a big point in my life, something I'd worked kind of long and hard towards, and I was able to do it, so that was pretty good. Cycling across the Rockies in Canada was a big thing, and actually, as you'll probably find out later, that was never actually intended to happen that way. We were never actually intending to cycle across the Rockies. To say we did it by accident, I think, is the closest. But actually, it was one of the best things I've ever done. And a lot of it's also more kind of day-to-day life. I mean, okay, pre-pandemic maybe, but literally we're scuba diving with sharks every day. When I'm swimming around, watching these sharks and doing all the cool stuff, and then I remember that I'm actually getting paid to be there as well. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome, because you're actually, I don't know if we just covered it, but you're living in the Cayman Islands at the moment, aren't you? And you've been there sort of on and off for quite a few years now. And I know when I caught up with you on the phone and we were sort of talking about, the pandemic and stuff like that. And then you're like, well, I probably shouldn't complain too hard. And then you switch the camera phone around and show me this absolutely stunning sea view from your balcony. So it must be quite surreal just sort of waking up in that place every day for the last however many years. Yeah,
absolutely. You got to remind yourself of it from time to time, though, because the human brain is wired in such a way that you always desire what you can't have. And so when you live on a tropical Caribbean island, sometimes you hanker for some mountains or a city or something. And it's important to remember sometimes that actually, I'm pretty lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. So you touched on there how your attitude's obviously changed a lot over the years, and maybe if you sort of went back in time with the attitude that you've got now, you would have done things a little bit differently. I've got a couple of questions for you about that. So firstly, you've managed to create a life that a lot of people consider to be sort of a dream life. We always hear about this concept of enjoy your job, never work a day in your life, and trying to make a living out of something that you're super passionate about is obviously kind of the ultimate dream for a lot of people. When you were younger, did you envisage that you would actually be able to make a sustainable career that would last this long out of just doing essentially the things that you love to do?
No, never would have thought about it, to be honest. Not for any other reason than I always figured that I wanted to, but I just never really, I struggle to plan ahead even now, I think half the adventures I have is through lack of planning and accidents than anything else. And especially, 12, 13 years ago, I had absolutely no idea what I was going to be doing. So, no, I guess is the answer to your question.
Interesting. You just kind of fell into it and just kept going. That's amazing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So my sort of second question within that kind of remit, I guess, is, obviously you've learned loads of different lessons about yourself along that journey. Is there anything that kind of stands out to you as being particularly prominent as a key kind of takeaway for you in terms of your own personal development that you feel has been invaluable to you from being able to have that career in adventure and being exposed to travel all the time?
I think the biggest takeaway is that when I first started doing this kind of stuff, because really, except maybe one or two short-term jobs, I've never actually had a real job. I've always been skydiving or scuba diving, and the reason I always wanted
Halford's bike cut. What do you mean?
I was at Sainsbury's as well. That's my first job. But anyway, and you obviously, there's all these cliches that you see people posting up on Facebook. Funnily enough, often from people that actually don't do anything. And you spend your entire life trying to prove the cliches wrong and prove them as that. But actually, the more you try and prove them wrong, the only thing you're really doing is actually proving them right. And one of the biggest ones is you got to stop comparing yourself to others. And I particularly find that now, because even I'll go on Instagram or Facebook or whatever else, and I'll be like, really proud, I've done a 100-meter dive, and it's a big thing. And then I'll see someone's done a 200-meter dive, and I'll be like, man, I feel terrible again. And that's, and I think in some ways you've got to be really careful with social media and things like that, because you're always going to compare yourself to people that are doing things that you're not doing. And they may be looking at yours and wishing they were doing what you were doing. And I think the biggest takeaway I've learned is just to chill out and stop worrying about what everyone else is doing and just do what you want to do. I think was a big
thing it's really important to remember that Instagram's essentially like a modern digitized version of those photo collages that people would more traditionally put on their hallway or the fridge or whatever. And what's more, because they know, even worse than that, because it's being broadcast to potentially such a huge audience, everything that's put on there is polished up, it's made to look shinier than it really is, and filters put on there and everything else. Really, if you were to build your own photo collage and put it on your own fridge or in your own hallway, and people were to only see that insight of your life would also look like that,
Right, absolutely, yeah.
So, life's not like that. There's troughs in between all those peaks.
Yeah.
Obviously, like we say, or like we're kind of both alluding to, Instagram's taking it to that next level where everything's polished up, made to look super shiny, and it's not really a reflection of what's going on.
Absolutely.
And that comparison, I agree. That comparison can definitely bring you down if you don't take it with that very large pinch of salt.
Yeah.
So good stuff, mate. Good stuff. So you're now in the Caymans. You're mainly diving. That's quite a turnaround from skydiving. I would say these sports in some ways are almost opposite ends of the spectrum. Skydiving's super high octane. Diving is, in its very nature, about trying to sort of be relaxed. You get the most out of the dive, the more relaxed you can be, isn't it? So how has that kind of changed you as a person, sort of going from such a high adrenaline type sport into this kind of much more sort of leisurely therapeutic profession?
It's a good question.
Have you found that transition difficult, or is it?
I actually, I'm not shy with this information, but when I first started diving, having come from skydiving, it was an easy transition in some ways, because I found diving relatively easy, straightforward to learn. I didn't necessarily fear it, and I kind of breezed through it in some ways. But I was a little bit disappointed by it. I guess I had visions of, diving down to these shipwrecks with a knife in my teeth, battling off krakens and all that kind of stuff.
You're not doing that.
Yeah. So I tell the girls in the bar anyway. And then the truth of it was exactly that. It's a lot more relaxed, but I think that can actually be a little bit of a disservice as well, because I think it's all about perception for me. And I think the reason skydiving is actually statistically, as far as number of participants goes, safer than scuba diving is. And I think what it comes down to is perception. Skydiving looks super dangerous, and so people treat it with a lot of respect. Before you get on the plane, you have to do all these checks. You check each part of the equipment, and those checks have to be signed for. People, they really kind of, especially in the earlier years of skydiving, early on in their career, everything is done by the book. Whereas scuba diving, because it has that perception of being safer than skydiving, and I think it's marketed in such a way that anyone can do it, and everything else, I think it doesn't necessarily get the respect from its participants that it should. And I think that's why accidents happen, because people don't necessarily treat it correctly. And I think scuba diving, things can go wrong. They just go wrong a lot slower, but it will still kill you just the same as skydiving. Dead is dead, at the end of the day. Doesn't matter how you got there. But you got to be really careful with diving.
I think this is one of the beauties for me of outdoor adventure sports, is that you have to learn that level of respect, especially when especially when you're at the will of nature's elements. I was reading a really awesome book. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Philosophy for Polar Explorers. But I was reading, it's a really awesome book. You have to check it out. I was reading a section in there, and he was talking about how, anyone who's never been in those kind of extreme circumstances like polar exploration or deep sea diving or whatever will never understand the importance of paying attention to the small details, because in those situations the small details are the things that will completely screw you when the shit hits the fan. And I was thinking about like when I was in the Marines and paying so much attention to the way you administer yourself in the field, like making sure everything that's important is lanyarded to you and that you know exactly which pocket everything's in. Never leave pockets undone, because you don't want to be dropping grenades or magazines out of your webbing as you're running away from a firefight or whatever. And I think that's such an important, valuable lesson that is quite hard to learn under any other circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. And we often find that actually ex-military guys or currently serving military do really well at activities such as skydiving and scuba diving. In fact, a lot of the skydiving instructors that I work with, and indeed some of the many of the scuba diving instructors, are military guys, girls, whatever.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cool, awesome stuff. So over the years you've had loads of different trips and stuff like that. Is there anything that you've done that you would say particularly has had a kind of life-changing impact on you throughout the years? Any sort of stories or particular incidents that have happened?
I mean, many. It's just, I guess it's narrowing it down to a few, I guess, particular ones, or not to change the tone of the conversation, but unfortunately, the very nature of these activities, I have been on scene for fatalities, both in skydiving and scuba diving. And it definitely, it gives you a respect for that particular sport, but also makes you realize just how quickly it can happen, how final it seems. Like the skydiving one, the guy that was killed, I was talking to him 10 minutes previously. I mean, literally just talking to them, and you don't think anything of it, and he had this, I was kind of packing parachutes, not his, I hasten to add, but he was jumping these very high performance parachutes that, well, that's a subject for another time, but they need to be flown well and correctly, otherwise they will kill you, because it's like driving a Ferrari versus a Golf. It's when things go wrong, they go wrong a lot quicker on these kind of parachutes. Anyway, and I said to him, I was like, if you want, you want to teach me, and I can show how you like these parachutes packed, and I can pack parachutes, because I mean it was all super rushed. It was a really busy day, and he didn't really have time. He was like, yeah, man. I'll tell you what. When I get down after this next jump, I'll have a bit of time, and I'll show you how it all goes together, and then you can do it. And then the next thing I know, and I did see him again, but he wasn't talking by that point. And it kind of, it made you realize that firstly, the respect for the activity, but also just, you don't know it's your day until it's your day. And I think, again, another cliche that you try and prove wrong only to prove it right is that you don't know when it's the final day, and you have to, you have to kind of live your life to a certain extent, bearing that in mind.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, definitely. I think that is another valuable thing that adventure can teach you. We had Mike Shipman on here. He's one of the top MMA guys in the UK at the moment. Had him on the talk last week, and he started off at one point quoting Rocky 3 with there is no tomorrow. At one point, Apollo Creed starts shouting at Rocky, "There is no tomorrow," and then Mike kind of added his own bit on there, which is whatever you're going to do today is all you're ever going to do. And he was sort of talking about how as he was sort of building his fight career, he was sort of always waiting for the next fight to do something differently, always waiting for the next fight to really let himself go. And he was always this kind of rationale of I just need to secure a safe win for the next one, and then I'll be in the big competitions, and then I can and then I can really show my stuff. And then he'd make that win happen, and then he'd get to the bigger competition and be like, well, you've just got to the bigger competition, maybe you should establish yourself. And eventually he realized it wasn't helping him to not enjoy the process, and his motivations to fight started to change. And in the end, he came out with this quote like, there is no tomorrow, what you're going to do today is all you're ever going to do. And I ended up sort of reposting it because it really struck with me.
Yeah, I think I saw that one. Yeah.
And I think that is the great thing about adventure. You realize, like, every adventure you go on, you realize it could have been your last, and maybe, you know, whatever it was that you wanted to do on that one, you need to do next time, because who knows when your time's up.
Yeah. Actually, one of my earliest mentors when I first, kind of the guy that's responsible for getting me into this kind of lifestyle, is when I dropped out of university. I don't know if you ever met him. I think you may have done. He was in the parachute regiment, then went on to special forces, and then when he left the army, he got into like teaching martial arts and base jumping and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, and one of the things he told me very early on is that when it comes to safety in any activity, is he imagined you've got two jars, like glass jam jars, whatever else, and one is labeled luck and one is labeled experience. And the luck one is full of pebbles. And every time you do a jump or you do a dive or whatever, you take one pebble from the luck jar and you put it in the experience jar. And one day you're going to run out of luck, and it's experience that will actually keep you alive. And yeah, and I think it's important to kind of bear that lesson in mind when it comes to this.
That's
kind of
awesome.
Stuff. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, it's
That's very, very poignant. I'm going to remember that one for sure.
Yeah.
So how much luck do you think you're down to now?
Well, that's kind of what I was going on to. You were saying about, you know, the point you were just making about your MMA guy, and there's so many times where I've kind of got away with something by the skin of my teeth, and I've literally thought to myself at the time, like, kind of got away with that one, you know, and it looks badass to, you know, people around you, but inside you're just like, oh man, like, how did I pull that off? And yeah, there's been a few like that for sure.
Yeah, be aware of when your luck pebble jar is running low.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, awesome stuff. So, am I right in remembering, because it's been a long time since we've actually seen each other in the flesh, but I believe I'm right in saying that your dad was quite into adventure biking. Is that right?
He's really into motorcycle touring.
Cycle touring. Okay,
yeah. Motorcycles, yeah, like motorbikes.
Right. Are you coming from sort of like a line of adventurous people, or not really?
In their own way, and you know, adventure is very personal. And I think, again, looking back to that Instagram point, I think the word adventure does get misused a lot nowadays, and people look to people like, you know, Levison Wood and you know, Ed Stafford and all that, and these crazy adventures they go on walking across the Himalayas. But I think adventure is more personal, and I know certainly my dad, my mum, and other members of my family have done their own personal adventures. My mum grew up in Africa, and so for her, you know, she was out horse riding and, you know, wrestling snakes and all this kind of stuff, as she likes to tell it, as a kid. And my dad, his passion has always been cars and motorbikes, and every time he tells a story, it usually begins with, you know, I was motorbiking through the Alps one day, and then X happened. So yeah, I guess in their own way, I do, maybe not quite to the same extent that I've chosen to, but you know, certainly it's in the blood somewhat.
Do you think it's something that is an innate part of everybody?
No, I would like to think it would be, but it's not, and it doesn't need to be. I think if everyone was the same, it would be incredibly boring. I think some people have it, some people don't. And often I found in my experience, and I could be naive in this, but it often seems to be people that don't have it are actually, they seem more content overall. I think the adventurous gene in people, I think you have an innate sense of dissatisfaction, which is always causing you to want to move on to the next thing. And I think that's one thing I've noticed is true a lot, you know, around, you know, among people that I associate with that do this kind of stuff. Yeah,
I totally agree. I mean, that's quite a clear-cut difference between myself and my girlfriend. We're both adventurous. She loves to travel and stuff, but I'm always looking for like the most difficult way to do something, or, you know, the most challenging thing to do. And I'm always thinking about the goal. You know, I have to put a lot of time and effort into trying to be more present and really kind of enjoying the process of things, rather than hinging everything on the outcome. Whereas she's just super happy to do whatever is happening right now.
Yeah, I find the same actually with my girlfriend. She's a lot more logical than I am. A good example, like it relates exactly to what you just said about always trying to find the most difficult way to do something. We were in Belize, and we're in a hotel, and we were trying to get out of the hotel early in the morning, go for a walk or breakfast, whatever it was we were doing, and they had locked us in, or so I believed. So there was this kind of outdoor courtyard area surrounded by a fence, and when I realized we were locked in, I'm trying to find ways to scale the fence, you know, like Rambo style. So I'm like halfway up this fence trying to get out, and she just opens the gate. And she's like, oh, we could go out the gate. And, you know, it's that classic thing. I just didn't think it through. I was just like, immediately wanted to do it like the most adventurous way possible.
Yeah.
You know, so it happens.
That's it. But if needs be, you were prepared to scale the walls.
Right. So,
you know,
absolutely. Yeah. The intention was there for sure.
Yeah, that's a funny one. Have you, obviously you've not just been working, you've not just been undertaking like personal adventures, you made your career out of it. So you've been mostly guiding other people and facilitating them, learning how to take themselves on these trips and things like that. So have you kind of ever noticed like an obvious sort of change in anyone that you've taken out, like as a guide? Have you seen, like consciously seen positive effects take place on people's way of thinking and stuff off the back of the adventures that they've done with you? Is that something that you really notice?
Probably a poignant but boring answer, all the time. Yeah.
Right.
Literally daily. And that's kind of why I love this job. And, you know, there's a lot of dive instructors who are really bitter. They're not interested. They don't want to talk to the customers. They're just trying to get the day done. They just want to go home and drink a bunch of beer and smoke cigarettes and everything else. And I think that's a real shame, because for me, I really like teaching, and I like to see that change, because I mean, it literally happens daily. You see that kind of change in people. And I think for me, that's what, every time I wake up in the morning and I don't want to go to work, it's dark, it's cold in a loose term, but it'll be rainy and windy, and you know it's going to be really rough on the boat, and you're just like, I don't want to be out there. And then within an hour of being around people and kind of that vibe, it changes your own mood around. So,
I mean, I think that's one of the quintessential sort of traits that you need as a guide in just about any capacity. You need to revel in the energy that you get off of the people that you're delivering that service to. You know, even as a fitness coach, I would say the same thing just about running like group fitness classes and things like that. You know, if you can't enjoy getting that energy, getting that vibe back of the people that you're coaching, even if you're not doing, you know, fitness with them that's necessarily difficult for me, you know, I still get a kick out of seeing other people get pushed to their limit and break through those limits and things like that. And I think if you kind of don't get that, if you don't get that kick out of that specific aspect, then you're not really in the right job, to be honest.
Well, that's it. And there's a lot of instructors that don't want to do, for example, we have a program called DSD, Discover Scuba Diving, sometimes called a resort course. And that's for beginners. There's no certification out of it, but they do this program, they do a classroom, a pool session, and then they go and do one dive, and they get to tell their friends about it back home, maybe post a picture to Facebook, but that's it. And a lot of instructors turn their nose up at it. And sure, I wouldn't want to do it every single day, but I do enjoy doing them. But for that is that reason. Yeah, it's, you can do them in your sleep almost, but it's that enjoyment of seeing people. It's your 1,000th time for me, but it's their first time.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think to myself, and again, like another great example is you find yourself, and I'm sure in fitness coaching it's the same. You say, I'll say the same sentence 3 times a day, every day, and I have done for 10 years. Like certain sentences in dive instructing, you just say all the time, but you don't get sick of it, because if you do, I have to just remind myself, I'm a dive instructor. You need to say these things. It's part of your job. Just the same as any other job. There are certain elements of that job that you do day in, day out. That's why it's a job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a strange one. So, I mean, I think that personally, one of the reasons that there's such a massive decline in public health is very much to do with the connection with nature. So, like fitness is all kind of one side for me. I do like to see, I obviously there's benefits of just doing more exercise to most of the population and stuff like that. And I like, as we've just been talking about, I enjoy sort of facilitating people through that journey. But I also actively encourage, wherever possible, that people do get involved more in exercise that's also not necessarily adventurous, but just that gets you outdoors, that gets you into natural landscapes, daylight. A lot of people aren't getting enough of that, just kind of the basics. And that was something that I noticed when I switched sort of back into more. So I used to be into sort of endurance running when I was in the Marines, and then when I went off to work for this wealthy family in the Middle East, I wasn't really running outside. It was too dusty and too hot, and I became a bit more of a gym queen again. And I ended up sort of leaving that job. First thing I did was a physique competition. I'd been really, hunkering down in the gym, getting back into lifting. And then once that physique show was done with, I did a little bit of traveling. And when I came back to fitness, I set my sights on an Ironman. And when I got into triathlon, I remembered that extra dimension to fitness when it involves something that's a bit more adventurous, a bit more exploratory. And I found all these amazing places. We just moved to Berlin. I thought I was stuck in the city, and then I was getting on the bike and realizing that there's lakes and forests and everything all around me, and finding these little places even in the city that were super, super beautiful, super natural sort of spaces. And so, I'm always trying to actively encourage people sort of get involved in more of that kind of stuff. What for you are the sort of biggest benefits of being involved in kind of adventure and travel over just exercise and fitness?
The two go hand in hand, really. In order to be able to enjoy being outdoors, I think being in some form of good physical health is really important. Even if it's just being able to kind of, climb over a fence or go up a hill to get a better view, the list goes on. And I think, certainly in Europe and places like North America where the winters are pretty harsh, I think a certain amount of gym work is needed just for conditioning. But I think just being out in nature doing activities outside the two are intrinsically linked. I think if you spend a lot more time outdoors doing physical activity, you will get fitter and stronger as a result. And I think a lot of this gym culture is focused more around aesthetics as opposed to actually being in good physical shape.
Yeah, absolutely. I had my brother on here not too long ago, a few weeks back, and we were talking about the same thing. He spent a lot of time out in Kenya. He was actually the warden of a conservancy out there. And he was doing two jobs. He was switching between working at a premium health retreat where they specialized in kind of reconnecting people with natural ways of movement. And it was all geared around this kind of evolutionary fitness blueprint where they'd get people doing the things that you would typically be doing in nature anyway. They'd make sort of fitness-based circuits and things out of it, but it was essentially recreating natural movement, lots of running, lots of swimming, things that mimic climbing, even sort of combat like wrestling and boxing drills and things like that. And then he'd go out for a few months and just work in the middle of the bush, driving a Land Rover around, trying to sort of catch poachers and keep an eye on the air and stuff. And we were talking about how the kind of evolution of what people think of as health and fitness, and how it's sort of become this very aesthetics-based thing after sort of bodybuilding became a big thing became a thing in the early 1900s, and then sort of gradually picked up pace after pumping iron and all this kind of media publicity. What people think of as health and fitness is this really weird sort of skewed version of what health and fitness actually is, which is just moving around enough that your body stays in good shape. And I was asking you, what if you've got a fitness regime outside of the work that you're doing, and you were talking to me about how that's very physical, and you're basically able to keep in shape just by doing your job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our average day of work, as I said, pre-pandemic, it's a bit different now, is between 8 to 11 hours long, all of which is outside. And although you're not actually necessarily doing, big heavy lifts, a tank is approximately like 15 kilos, something like that. But when you move 80 of them, suddenly that's a lot of work. And then you couple that with, walking up and down the dock. Now the dock is maybe 200 meters long. You walk up and down it 20 times a day. Then you're jumping on and off boats. You're climbing up and down ladders. You're swimming, obviously. And when each individual activity isn't necessarily going to make you look like Arnie, but when you put them all together for 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and suddenly you can stay in pretty decent shape. I mean, yeah, you're not going to look like a bodybuilder and anything. The opposite, because you're pretty skinny, but you're in really great shape.
Yeah, definitely.
So this year I've had to kind of bring in some other things into my life because we're just not doing those work days anymore. I'm 1 or 2 days a week at work now, some of which is just half days, and so I've started implementing a lot of outdoor stuff. We ride our bikes an awful lot and swim, and I'll do push-ups and pull-ups and that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I've been the same multiple times during my career, especially when I've been doing more and more in-person fitness-based stuff. Yeah, there's been times where I've realized I'm so active just for work that at this point, the only reason I need to train is to do the things that I specifically want to do. Like if I want to get better at running a 5K, like I have to do that. Yeah, I have to train for that. If I want to build more muscle, then obviously I'm going to have to do more resistance. But if I didn't do any of that, I would just be fine, just doing my job.
Yeah.
And that's a concept that I really try to push hard with a lot of my clients. I work with a lot of people that are quite career driven, so they spend a lot of time usually sat down on computers, or even if they're not sat down, something that has become a lot more popular nowadays has been like the standing desks. But even so, you really just stood looking at a screen. You're generally in the same positions, and a lot of the time these guys are asking me about how they can sort of do more with the time that they're exercising. And actually the biggest impact that they're going to have on things like weight loss and just overall health is actually not what they're doing during gym time. It's the amount of movement that they're able to fit into the rest of the day.
Yeah, so, fitness has to be, it can't be something you do like part of your life. It has to be your life in every way you can do. Now, we can't all lift scuba tanks around and run up and down dive boat ladders. We don't. And so, but if you can walk to work or take the bus or train to the stop before work and then walk the rest of the way, do the same in reverse, again, cliches. It's walk when you could take the car and take the stairs instead of the lift, and all of these kind of things. Sure, it's not going to turn you into a fitness model overnight, but 10 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes, 10 minutes here. You've done 2 hours of exercise a day. I mean, that's more than you'll ever do in a gym. Yeah,
absolutely. That's it. And you really can't overvalue the health benefits of just that intermittent movement. It makes such a difference. And the studies show that, there's loads of data on this, like obese people, it sounds like common sense, but obese people just generally move less than non-obese people.
Yeah.
That's as simple as that. But it's not fitness. It's just movement. Yeah. So one of the reasons that I was really keen to get you on here was because I noticed how much you started to write about your adventures and your travels and things like that. So what's been your main sort of driver for wanting to share your experiences with other people and put together the website that you have?
The website's actually been around since 2012, but I kind of did it. I was super motivated when I first started it. And then I was looking at statistics earlier in the Google Analytics, and it basically sat dormant really until the beginning of this year. And I really just wanted to write about the cycle trip, the one we did last year through the Rockies. And so I just wanted to kind of blog about that. So I did that and I wrote the story. And then when lockdown happened and suddenly we had a lot more free time on our hands, I had several goals I wanted to achieve, and website design and development was one of those. So it wasn't particularly altruistic where I wanted to write this down. I didn't set out to make this really helpful website that people would love to go on, but a lot of it was more of an experiment. And then it kind of snowballed from there. And now what I'm finding is that the problem is that I really now want to have this, I'm using it as like a journal of all the stuff that I've done. And so I'm now having to go back in my memories, literally, and write about stuff that happened 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's a long, slow process, which I'm enjoying, but yeah, it's going to take some time. But a lot of it was, to kind of answer your question more directly, why I started writing was to have a record as much for myself as anything else, because it blows me away how much stuff I forget. And sometimes it's when someone else will say something, again, maybe diving, they'll say, hey, you remember that time when, you know, we were swimming along and we saw that hammerhead shark? And I was like, no, I'd forgotten. And I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to just forget all this cool stuff. So yeah, I guess writing it down seemed the logical thing to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm the same. There's so many things that I've done and I've been on that where I've wished afterwards that I just kept a diary. I've thought about it so many times throughout my life. And we were talking about this as well on the phone. And there's only one occasion where I actually did it when myself and my girlfriend went to Vietnam, and we got this motorbike, this tiny little motorbike that we managed to fit both of us on, plus this huge bag on the back, and then rode down the Ho Chi Minh Road, like through all this amazing landscapes, and just all sorts of bizarre things happened along that trip that I'm sure I probably would have forgotten half the memories if I hadn't have had the foresight to keep a diary during that time. And I'm so glad that I actually did it. And yeah, I definitely, it's going to be something that I'm going to try to do every time I go on an adventure from this point onwards.
Yeah.
So yeah, cool. So where do you see the website going now? Is it just going to continue to sort of be a journal for you, or is there anything that you were hoping to make out of it?
That's a good question. I'm going to keep it for now. All I'm worried about is content creation. I'm not worried about, I mean, the audience will grow somewhat organically as a result of that, as people kind of read the stuff, and then if they like it, they'll obviously continue to read it. They'll check back, they'll subscribe, do all that kind of stuff. But I'm not doing any form of, audience growing specifically. I'm not doing any SEO, search engine optimization. I'm not doing any monetization. I'm not doing any of that. All I'm concentrating on for the next year at least is content. Then I'll see where I'm at. And if it seems to be growing in such a way that I think people, are liking it, and it could potentially bloom from there, then I'll look at, furthering that. But for now, it's just about having the content, and people will find it. I don't really post it on Facebook very much. I'll post maybe one blog in 10 I'll put on there, and I'll only promote, post it once. I don't want to get to a point where you post so much on Facebook that people end up, hiding your posts because they're so sick of seeing you popping up there. I want each and every single post that I put up to have value. And so I want people to kind of click it and actually read something decent, see some good pictures, maybe laugh, and have, actually take some value away from that, because then when you post again in the future, they're more likely to look at it. And if they don't want to, that's fine. There's plenty of people that don't look at it, and that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you obviously do have some kind of desire to really share your experience with people. I don't think it's necessarily totally, I don't see it as totally selfish in the way that you kind of described it, because you already said that you obviously get something out of facilitating these experiences for people in person, and whilst you're writing these stories, you're sort of writing it with the aim of sharing it. So there must be something that you kind of get out of people seeing it and getting some value.
Yeah, perhaps you're right. I mean, maybe I've not actually put conscious thought towards it, but maybe there is that little part of me that just wants to kind of share my love and passion for something with others, just the same as I do with diving. So yeah, it's a good point. Maybe I'll kind of pursue that idea of thought and see if I can develop something from there.
Awesome. So we touched earlier on so like a daily occurrence. You said that you see some positive changes in people when you take them through their courses and things like that. What kind of things do you see? What kind of changes do you see in people when they come diving with you and they come on adventures for the first time? what are the most sort of obvious changes that you witness?
I mean, it completely depends. There are a lot of our clients and customers that they're exactly that. That's exactly how the relationship works. You know, they come down here, they pay their fees, they come on the boat, and I'm a staff member. I provide a service, and they go home again, and that's the end of that. But we do get maybe kind of 1 in 10 that you really get to develop a special relationship with, and you know, it's really good to see someone that you've taken from, you know, a brand new diver that they've never dived before. You take them through the course, and this has only happened a few times, but then you're taken through the next course and the next one and the next one, and you know, a couple of years later they're an instructor, and you know, they look healthier, they're slimmer just from leading more active lifestyle. They maybe got into diving because of some kind of mental trauma in their past, or something like that. It can vary. And then you get customers that maybe, I mean, a clear example I can remember is we had this couple. I mean, they must have been in their 70s, 80s even. I mean, they were doing really, really well. And they were from Maine up in the northeastern United States. And they were doing this tri-dive, just one-off experience thing. And they were pretty nervous in the pool. And I'm not going to lie, they weren't, you know, acing every single part of it, but they did really, really well, and their perseverance was admirable. And I said to them, look, I said, I know you guys aren't finding this particularly easy, but why don't we go out on the boat and try it and go and try and do a dive? I think, you know, it's just the two of you, it should be fine. They got in the water and they grabbed hold of the rope, and I said, all right, guys, we're going to start making a descent now. And all they did was hand over hand down the line as quick as they possibly could. No equalization of the ears. I was trying to frantically slow them down, stop them. They touched the bottom, they turned around, and they went back up again. And that was all they wanted to do. They just wanted to say they had done it, because they knew that, you know, they didn't have as many years left as they would have liked, and they had this bucket list idea of doing a dive. And it was this amazing, despite scaring the hell out of me at the time, it was this amazing experience that they just went away from this feeling accomplished. You know, they had really done something, even though it would have been a completely weird experience for me in that same position. But, you know, to them, they took meaning from that. So that was quite an interesting one for me to look at personally.
That's it's a really to me, that's quite a strange perspective to have on it, you know, to want to go and to only get it done. But then I guess it does come with that sense of achievement that they just might not get. Yeah, they're not necessarily there to really enjoy the process. They just want to get from A to B and get the benefits of that. And if they get some benefit out of that, then I guess, you know, fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, and more daily occurrences, again, to answer your question more directly, sometimes it's even with the most experienced divers, the ones that, you know, have been diving for a long time. We get a lot of divers that have been diving since like the 70s and the 80s, and they've been diving, as they like to tell me, longer than I've been alive. But, you know, they dive once or twice a year, if that, and sometimes they'll struggle with something particular on a dive. It's really impacting their enjoyment and their value that they're getting from that dive. And to, you know, it's a simple everyday occurrence for us, something like, you know, not taking as much weight with them on the dive so that they feel more comfortable. They don't use as much air. They don't, you know, they're not dragging so much through the water, or it's something simple like that, which I could just simply write off as just being a daily occurrence. But for them, I've had people come up, I've had people hug me and said that I've revolutionized their diving, which seems really over the top. But for them, if they're passionate about diving, you know, they spend their entire year of work with, you know, desktop screensavers of these underwater scenes, and they this is their thing, you know, it's what they look forward to all year long. A simple thing of adjusting their weighting for them to give them a better experience. I think there's a lot more to it than I think, you know, dive instructors realize sometimes. So,
yeah, that's interesting. So I've got a bit of a theory about one of the benefits of being involved in particularly like adventure sports, where you really have to be totally kind of zoned into what you're doing, even if it's just for, you know, nothing other than safety purposes. And I think that in the modern age, a lot of people are required less and less to really concentrate on any given thing for a prolonged period of time. You know, everything happens very fast now. Everything's spoon-fed on social media. You're scrolling from one thing to the next. You know, even adverts have got shorter and shorter and shorter over the years, because they know that people don't have that focus to sit through anything that's you know, goes on for any length of time. but for me, it's super important that people practice this art of concentration. You know, if you can't really sit and concentrate on anything, then there's no way you're going to be able to sort of sit with yourself and like meditation, for example. I think it's one of the benefits of meditation. You know, it teaches you this art of kind of sitting with yourself and dwelling on your own problems, your own challenges, and coming up with a solution, which will always take time. But when you are doing something like diving, or, you know, cross-country skiing or skydiving or climbing, especially, you know, something like climbing, in fact, you know, it's forcing you to focus very intently on a particular practice and think about safety, think about technique, think about your form, think about all these little nuances. And especially when it's your first few times and you're particularly inefficient at it, then that's when you're having to really sort of concentrate the hardest. And then once you get over that curve and you're able to kind of perform that activity and not concentrate on it too hard, but that you're still required to have a connection with it the whole time and engage with it the whole time, that's when I see people able to enter this sort of flow state where they reach that almost meditative state about themselves, where they're really tuned into that activity, and you get all these benefits, and you get all this massive like endorphin release from that, you know, the regulation of the brain chemicals and things. And for me, I see that as being one of the main, or not main, but one of the major benefits of being involved in adventure sports. Is that something that you would agree with? Have you got any kind of experience with?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think the human mind does, or certain people's mind does have it craves, I don't know if danger is the right word, but it craves that intensity. And I think modern life doesn't provide it to us. And, you know, I think, you know, nipping to Tesco's to buy some steaks doesn't compare to chasing woolly mammoths with spears, you know. And I think what kind of modern life is failing to give us, we're trying to seek artificially in many ways. And some people turn to, say, drink or drugs, or, you know, bar fights and all this kind of thing. And then some people are able to channel that in a more positive way and take on things like, you know, scuba diving or skydiving, or any adventure sport, because it brings them a little bit back down to the natural kind of human state. And a great example, which I can think of just off the top of my head, is cycling in the Rockies was a great example, because each day our main concerns were, where are we going to pitch the tent? Somewhere that's safe, you know, is sheltered. It's going to be, you know, protected from rainfall. We need to, have we got food? You know, are we preserving our food correctly? Is it being stored correctly? Are there mice getting to it where we keep it? And really predators as well, because Canada has a few bears, you know. And as we were traveling later in the summer, that's when they're more of a concern, because they're foraging and they're trying to fatten up for their hibernation. And so to go through life, you know, in a world of, you know, iPhones and skyscrapers and space travel and airlines and all this kind of stuff, to have to think, where am I going to sleep? Have I got food? And what am I going to do about predators? It really brought us back down to this very basic level, and it was actually really life affirming overall to do that. So that was a really quite important lesson.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so many more dimensions there. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things where I've been really interested to do. So at the moment, I'm doing this project, which is like my 12 Labours project, where over the next, or within 12 months, I'm looking to do 12 personal challenges, different one each month. And the first one I started off with was 100-kilometer ultra run.
Cool.
And the thing that I loved the most about it, to be honest, was that there was not that many people participating in the 100K event. There was a few events taking place on the same course. There was half marathon, and 10K, often to 10K. And then there's the 100K. And the 100K, in order to bring all of the events into the finish at around about the same time, they actually started the 100K at midnight the night before.
Uh-huh.
And so you start in the pitch black, and you're having to kind of, to an extent, self-navigate in the dark for about 6 hours before the sun comes up. And you know, one of the nice things about organized events usually is that everything's kind of taken care of for you. Yeah, the route's clearly marked out. You've got people there everywhere telling you where to go. You've got refreshment stations and all this kind of stuff. And even though the 100K was still kind of like that, just having this element where I actually had to sort of look after myself a little bit, just brought a whole new dimension of challenge into it. And just sort of going back to what you were talking about people needing that kind of intensity and that stimulation, you know, I realized it then. I realized in that moment, like, wow, this is actually what I really needed more than the event being organized. Yeah, that was it. That's it. So yeah, it's a really interesting point that you mentioned there, and I totally agree. And I think, you know, in some ways, these organized events aren't challenging enough for people. there's a whole different element there that is worth uncovering when you go on an adventure like that, you know. And same thing, I can relate to your story. It was the similar kind of thing when we were on that motorbike going down through Vietnam. You know, you can't ride at night because it's too dangerous. You know, everybody's drinking there. They drink and drive on these mountain roads. Like, you're on a tiny bike, if someone hits you, like, you're dead. You don't know for sure, even when you're looking for hotels on the map, if they're definitely going to be there or they're definitely going to be open. So you're having to kind of plan these things in advance, like, okay, there's a possibility of maybe 3 hotels here, and we'll just have to see which ones are really there when we get there. And we hope that it's only going to take, you know, a certain amount of time, and that will be there before dark. And I remember one night we were we were running out of fuel. It was starting to get dark. The first hotel that we planned to stop at wasn't there. And then it just started to downpour with rain. And I remember just being on this bike and thinking, oh my God, please let the next hotel be open, you know. And thankfully, as we pulled up to it, there was a guy there who ushered us in, opened the gate, it was undercover, we got dry. It's a huge sense of relief. Yeah, and it was only really that we planned, you know, the trip the way we did, that we made sure we actually got somewhere that night.
We call that type 2 fun. And every time things turned a bit like crap and we're just like, oh God, what are we doing? We would say it's type 2 fun. We'll look back on this and it'll be funny, you know, but at the time it's not as much.
Mate, I love that. That's such a great name for it. I'm gonna make a note of that one. Yeah. That is that's really funny.
But it's funny, isn't it? Because just to last kind of finish that off, talking about getting back to nature. I mean, it's again, in the world of iPhones and, you know, air travel and everything else, you know, we've as humans, we've spent thousands of years developing everything to make our life more comfortable. The technology, you know, agriculture and the wheel and electricity and all this kind of stuff. And then what do we do for fun? We go sleep in the woods in a tent, you know, and cook food on a fire. So you spend all this technological advancement to get to a point where you have, you know, a job, you can pay to have free time and all this kind of stuff. And then with the free time that you've got, you go and literally go sleep in the woods. It's funny how that works sometimes.
You know, I really believe that I talk about this all the time. I talk about it with clients. I talk about it in the content that I put out there. Like, you know, I really believe that in order for humans to thrive, we have to be exposed to regular stress. And stress has got this really sort of bad rap in recent years. So we talk about stress always within the sort of negative context, but there's 2 types of stress. You know, there's distress and there's eustress. And eustress is good stress. It literally means good stress, you know. And in nature and biology especially, there's all these processes that have a positive adaptation that follows a period of stress. You know, same when we go to the gym, we lift weights, we cause muscle damage, and we grow back stronger. You know, in terms of mindset, it's a bit more difficult to understand, but there is psychological research that shows that people will usually develop an improved ability to handle difficult situations following slight psychological trauma. You know, there's all these like biphasic mechanisms in nature where stress produces a positive outcome, you know, and and like you say, you know, we've got these lives now that are engineered to be as easy and and comfortable as possible. And the fact that people are taking themselves out to the woods to be kind of uncomfortable and seek the thrill of that, is just testament to me in this theory that we need that stress in order to grow and develop and to be the best versions of ourselves possible.
I agree. Yep.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why I encourage people to do something adventurous. You know, and you said earlier, you said something I really liked as well, which was adventure is very personal, which is I think is a brilliant statement, because you're absolutely right. Like, I think when you say the word adventure, people think of climbing Everest or, you know, skydiving out of a plane, and that, to me, that's not adventure. To me, adventure is anything that's taking you slightly out of your comfort zone to explore something new, not necessarily about a place, but about yourself.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you something specific. I can't remember what the question was, but touch on with you. Totally lost my train of thought. Yeah, that was it. So earlier on, you're talking about how I asked you if you sort of envisage yourself ending up in a career that was oriented completely around what you're doing now, and you said that no, you know, that basically sort of happened accidentally. And you also said a bit later on about how people came out to do courses, and maybe they came out to do their first dive course, and then they're back for their, you know, their next ones, and then before they know it, they're an instructor. Now, obviously, at the moment, the pandemic is making it a little bit difficult for people to do adventure on any level. But assuming that, you know, this will be removed from our existence at some point in the future, or it won't be, you know, it'll be a negligible concern at the very least. How easy is it for a person to go from sort of being fairly non-adventurous to living an adventurous life, or potentially even making a career out of it?
I think it's actually a lot easier than people think it is. I think the barriers to entry, or perceived barriers to entry, are great, and again, it's even worse now with social media and everything else, because you're like, what's the point? You know, there's so many people doing it, and they're going to do it way better than I could ever possibly do it, and I think people just don't even bother trying. And I think actually, if it comes down to how much you want something. I mean, if someone's non-adventurous and they're completely happy with that, then yes, it's going to be very difficult for them to then make adventure part of their life, because there's no point. They don't want to. I think if someone is maybe disillusioned in their current state and, you know, what they're up to, and want to make some changes, I think certainly in Western countries, I mean, there's really not an excuse not to. We're very, you know, people say to me all the time, you know, there's a lot of you're very privileged to be where you're from, and I say I know that. It's not lost on me that to be from a country such as the UK, where I have this ability to go and do these things, I almost saw it as the opposite to how they intended it. They were trying to make me feel guilty that, you know, so many people in the past sacrificed so much to allow me to do what I do, and I see it as the opposite. So many people have sacrificed so much so that I can do what I can do. So why not do it? And I think if anyone from, you know, a lot of the Western world, to use a phrase, who wants to do these things can, and you just have to have the desire to do it, and you have to make sacrifices. I mean that's the big thing. Is there's a lot I have sacrificed, which people don't necessarily see, and it's those sacrifices that mean I can do this kind of stuff. And you know, that's a whole new subject for another time, those sort of things. But yeah, if you want to do it, there's absolutely no reason why you can't.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. So I noticed that when I was reading through your blog post, I mean, obviously you're based in the Caymans, which makes it very easy for you to sort of walk outside the door and doing things that a lot of people would consider only to do on holiday, or, you know, on an adventure or something like that. But, you know, I make a point sometimes of stressing to people that you can have adventures pretty much wherever you are, and there are people that are actively doing this quite prominently in social media. People like Alistair Humphreys, who's been he's released a book recently, I think called Doorstep Mile. He's just talking about like cycling around his county where he lives and seeing what's there. And he did a thing a while back as well where he just walked around the M5. The M25, just walked around it.
What was the name of the guy? Was it the Alistair Humphreys guy, right?
Alistair Humphreys,
yeah. He was one of my earliest inspirations with one of his first books he did. It was a two-part, but it was the cycling around the world.
Yes, I have.
Thunder and Sunshine.
Read it.
Like yeah,
it's something like that. It's definitely Thunder. That's an awesome book.
But to kind of build on your point, I think location is a very poor excuse for not getting out there. And yeah, sure, I'm great. I mean, I live in the Cayman Islands. I can go and scuba dive with sharks. Like in an hour's time from now, I could be out scuba diving with sharks if I wanted to be. But that's just because I live here. But what I can't do is climb a mountain. I can't go swim in a river. I can't go walk in the woods because I don't have those things. I can't, go and look around the city. I can't go to a museum. I can't do all those things. So it's very easy to look at other people and go, well, it's fine for you. You can do all these things. Well, yeah, but I also can't do a lot of things that you can do. And I think it's knowing what you have on your doorstep that's really, really important. And I know that some of the adventures that I want to do in the future are actually in the UK. Like, one thing I've realized is I've always kind of had an awareness of it, but one thing I've really realized as I've got older is how lucky we are to have things like the canals. Like you can literally travel between most towns and cities in the United Kingdom, and you don't even go on a road. You can just go on a canal. So why not take a kayak and try and make your way, north to south on a kayak with a tent? I mean, you don't even have to. It doesn't cost anything. Apart from the kayak, obviously. But once you're out there, you just a tent, a kayak, stop off and cook food on a fire, and that's an adventure. No, it may not seem adventurous because you're in your home country, but if you're from another country, the UK is one of the, I think it's second, third most visited country in the world by foreign nationals. The UK is an adventurous place. You just don't think it is because you're from there. And I think that's why I think adventure is so personal, because it's so easy to write things off as not actually being adventurous when they really are.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I'm totally the same. I look back at the UK and think, oh man, there's loads of stuff I should have done while I was there. Just having Scotland there. You don't realise how sparsely populated Scotland is. And I went and lived in Scotland for a year, but I was based there in the Marines, and I didn't get a great deal of time to myself when I was there. And then I was gone all too quick. And then I realised, man, I really wanted to explore that place. And I always look back at it now and I want to go Munro bagging or
I think Scotland might be the second only to maybe second or third maybe to New Zealand or Canada is the most beautiful place I've ever been.
And you've got all the bothies as well. You can go bothy. Right. You've got a free place to stay everywhere you go.
And even close to home, and not that Scotland's particularly far relatively, but you've got Wales. The south of Wales is just extremely full of mountains and forests and all that kind of stuff. I think your mindset and being able to know what's on your doorstep is a huge thing. And I think it's very easy to write things off. And I certainly regret a whole bunch of stuff from all of my travels. I think I regret more things than things I'm proud of, because for every one thing I did, there's about 100 things I didn't do. And I think it can be, I think it's location independent. You just got to know what you do have.
So on that note, then, for people that were kind of hoping to, or for a while have been hoping to be a bit more adventurous and look for things that they can do, and were probably thinking that during this time they'd be going abroad or trying something a bit more like exotic than where they live, but are obviously now stuck where they are and still have the desire to be adventurous. Have you got any kind of tips for people that is just sort of like starting out down that route that they could look at broadening their adventure horizons locally?
I think it relates back to the previous point, is don't write things off. I actually did the vast majority of my dive master course I did in the UK, believe it or not. I actually finished it in Egypt, fair enough. But for a lot of it, and a lot of the early grunt work that I put in towards becoming a dive master, I actually did in the UK. I've done hundreds of dives in the UK, dry suit diving, cold water. And sure, it's not the best diving in the world. It can be really good. But it was a means to an end. I didn't have the money to go and do it somewhere else, various reasons. I found myself living in London for about 18 months. This is way back 2009, and I did it in the UK just because I could. That's the only thing I could do, and the UK does provide all those opportunities if you're prepared to go and look for them. That means the UK has 40,000 registered shipwrecks and bits of shipwrecks in its territorial waters, and so if you're really into diving and shipwrecks, then the UK could be actually one of the best places you could possibly be. But it's so easy to write it off because it's dark and it's cold and it's miserable, and you'd rather be at Nando's or something. I think it's my tip would be, if you want to do something, you just go and look for it, and you don't need to necessarily go somewhere exotic. Within reason. Yeah. I mean, you obviously can't go climbing 10,000-foot mountains if you're in the UK, but
no, but you can always find something somewhere. And I think that's the point that we're both sort of coming across with, really. There is always something wherever you are, and you'd be really surprised, like, what you can find close to where you live. I do it all the time. Even now I'm out running routes, and I'll just take like a slightly different route, and I'll be like, wow, this forest is unbelievable. Right? It just goes on for miles. Where there's a huge hill in the middle of the forest I never knew was there. And I found this place just recently around the corner. It's like a super steep hill, because there's no hills here in North Germany, And when I was training for this ultra run, I wanted to get some sort of hill training in, and I was sort of looking Google Maps terrain layer, trying to find something that was raised. And then I ended up finding this kind of hill. I don't even know why it's there, but it's got a cable car going to the top. But it's got mountain biking routes, coming down it, and it's got like a paved cycle path going up. And there was a guy there on a bike doing exactly the same thing as I was doing on foot, which was just going up and down and up, down. But there's so many little trails there. He's doing the same thing. It's just hill training. But it was an awesome find. But it's 10 minutes from where I live, and you would never think it was there. It's even got this huge step platform that goes up to the top. I mean, to me, that's like an adventure. The first day that I found that, and then went to the top, and then found, even when I was at the top, there's this other viewing platform that goes even higher. That was awesome. So I think it is. People will be surprised what you can find out there. So I've just got one more question for you, I think, and then I'll let you get on with the rest of your day. Well, I was interested to ask you if you think there's any. You say you've kind of never had a real job, but you are doing this for a career, and obviously there's parts of your profession that aren't just about being adventurous and diving and driving the boat and stuff like that. And then there's obviously all these other aspects to life that everybody has, like family and social life and all this kind of thing. So are there any sort of important life skills that you think you've got from being adventurous that you wouldn't have had if you'd had a real job all your life, that have helped you perform in other areas of life?
I mean, I think a big one is the ability to fail, I guess, would be. I don't know how to describe that. I didn't pre-rehearse that answer at all. But the ability to fail and to kind of understand, and this kind of style of living, you're constantly getting thrown curveballs that you never expected. And don't get me wrong, that does happen in regular life as well. I think it just feels a lot more intense, when it's happening in this kind of way. And earlier on, it's so easy just to kind of get angry by this, and it's everyone else's fault but my own, and getting to that mindset rather than just kind of taking it at face value and being able to kind of roll with the punches, literally. I mean, I remember when I first arrived here, driving boats. I'd driven boats elsewhere and was decent enough at it. And then I came here, and we're on the windward side of the island. 20 knots of wind is not unusual. And I remember trying to learn to drive the boat here and getting super frustrated because it was a lot more difficult than I was used to and everything else. And I was getting angry, and it bothered me. And now I'm in a position where I'm training new people, and I can see the same traits in them that I had myself earlier on. I just expected everything to fall onto my plate, and everything to go right all the time, and that's just simply not how it works.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think I would categorize sort of what you're saying within resilience, like acceptance of things that don't go wrong. Or in almost every case where you're talking about adventure sports, especially, you're reliant on two things: the weather, almost all of the time, and some kind of equipment. And in both those cases, I mean, you definitely can't control the weather. And sometimes equipment just breaks, doesn't work, does something funny, or you forget it. And you just are constantly having to react to those two things. And it just doesn't benefit you in any way, shape, or form to get frustrated about those things. And so you sort of end up having to develop this acceptance of, yeah, we're going to go out today. Yeah, we're going to go climbing today. We're going to hit the rock today. It's forecast to be nice and dry. You get there, you realize like it's rained the night before, but you didn't know the rock's still wet. Now you got to figure out something or whatever. You're just constantly dealing with new situations. Again, tying in a little bit with what we said about this regular discomfort and how we can, how we can thrive off the back of that. I think that acceptance is really key for sure. It's definitely helped me.
Especially a good point about nature and weather, because I think as humans, we've got to a point where we have so much technological prowess that we forget that you can't control the weather, and weather is still always going to win. And especially being from the UK, because in the UK we think we have weather, but we don't. It's either nice or it's drizzling. We don't really have catastrophic storms, well, very rarely. Snow is certainly unusual, and when we do have it, everything falls apart. And the UK, we don't have weather. So to go somewhere where you have weather and it's a lot more, prevalent in my day-to-day work, it definitely teaches a certain degree of, what's the word I'm looking for? Patience, humility, I guess is a good word for that. And, and you can see, and admittedly, people from cities are worse at this, but they'll come diving. And the weather will be terrible. I mean, big seas, really windy, and really not pleasant, and certainly not safe. And you'll say, "Look, sorry guys, we're not going to go diving today, but I paid to go diving today." And that's the human thing. But I paid to do it, and I think it's very easy to apply the typical modern world to nature, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. Nature's not going to bend to your will.
No, nature doesn't care what you pay.
Yeah.
And I think people forget as well that you're paying there, but we're being paid. So for us to not take you, we're actually giving up money. And money isn't me buying a sports car. Money's putting food on the table, So when we make these kind of decisions, for us, it's natural to take the weather into account when planning everything we do. And I think a lot of folks do forget that. And I think getting out in nature definitely teaches you humility is, I think, the best word.
Awesome. Good stuff, man. Well, we've gone on for quite a while there, and it's been awesome so far. But I know that videos don't tend to get too many more views after about this time. So we'll save the rest for a part two. Is there any kind of message that you want to leave the audience with today? Anything that you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, I think we've pretty much covered everything. I mean, one of my favorite things to do.
Go on.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is to help folks with stuff. So I became an instructor and a teacher and everything else. So if people are kind of inspired by what I talk about or what we talk about, then, I mean, I know you run coaching, but if people want to get more into the adventurous side of things, then reach out to me. I don't charge anything. I'm not trying to sell any product. Don't have to click on any banner ads on the website or anything like that. I'll talk to people about it and give advice in the humble way that I can. But yeah,
awesome. Where can people reach out to you? Where can they find your blogs and things like that?
Well, I was super creative when I came up with the name for my blog. Took lots of thought, and I read a lot of ancient literature, and I came up with www.jamessnelgrove.com.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which ancient literature did you stumble across that?
I was trying to think of different names, and there's a few names kind of sounded really good. Like the old name for the blog was Residual Nitrogen, which I thought was a really kind of witty name for a blog, but it was specific for diving. And then I was thinking like, Sky Adventures, and I was like, well, that's not relevant. And I was like, I need a name that's just gonna stick to whatever it is I do, because at one point I may be scuba diving, one point I may be skydiving or rock climbing, but I might also be because I like cooking and I like making cocktails and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, I need a name that's just going to work for every possible facet, of what I find interesting. So I just stuck with my first and last names.com.
Mate, I think you nailed it. You're definitely never going to forget it either. So
yeah,
there's multiple benefits there for sure.
If I forget my own name, blogging is going to be the least concern on my mind, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Awesome, good stuff. Well, we'll wrap it up there. I'll just remind the audience that there are some spaces available at the moment on my one-to-one coaching program, Theseus Body Mind Coaching Program. If you're looking to improve your fitness, manage stress better, and be the best performing version of yourself possible, then just book a free call with me via the link that's in the description. We can have a chat about your goals and figure out if we are the best fit to work together to achieve them. Thanks so much for coming on today, James. It's been an absolute blast. There's loads of stuff we could go on to talk about, so maybe we'll hit that up in a part 2. But for now, have an awesome day.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. More than welcome. Thanks for coming. Enjoy the Caymans.
Yeah, man.
Chat to you later.
Yeah.